Who has had an interview and they've walked away from it thinking, do you know what? I could have done that differently. It could have gone better.
Welcome everyone to the UX UI Hub Meet. Today we have Antonia with us. She is a certified coach internationally and she has a lot to teach about the job search. Thank you so much for joining the Hub.
So I want to start by saying that I'm really excited to be here because job searching and nailing interviews is something that even the most seasoned professionals can feel daunted by. And so it's a combination of using skill and an art. It's the art and the science. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. We've all been there. We've all had one or two, situations where we think we could have done better. And hopefully after today's session, you'll have some things to take away, some practical tools. We're going to go from feeling nervous to really feeling like you've made a big impact when you're interviewing. Let's think about it. What we often miss is the preparation. And I actually believe preparation is key because when we're well prepared, we then feel confident. It's really important how you do your preparation. So I was working with a client of mine going from a social media role to more of a strategic role in digital marketing. And she had to get across the point that her skills were really transferable. And she was struggling to articulate how her creative experience was going to add value in a more senior role. And so what we did is we mapped out her core strengths. We looked at the projects that gave her the most energy and we aligned them to the roles and the organizations that she was pursuing and she was interviewing for. And so by the time she walked into the interview, she really had a great story to tell about why her. And that left her feeling really confident and it left her feeling like she put her best foot forward, being prepared. It doesn't mean scripted at all. With online interviews, it's really easy and it's tempting to have your answers scripted. But I encourage you to maybe have some notes, maybe have some bullet points, but don't script your answers because you're going to lose that connection with the person or the people that you're speaking with. So it's really, really important to know your stuff. And that's where the preparation can come in. When we think about preparing, we've got to understand what the role is. We've got to understand the organization. Let's understand the company's mission, their values, their purpose. This is going to tell you a little bit about how they make decisions and a little bit about the culture. Have a look at their leadership team. What are their backgrounds? How long have they been there? Have there been any recent changes, recent projects or deals or press releases in case they come up in the interview as well? And then have a look at what's going on in the organization. So any annual report, any strategy documents, and that's going to give you a little bit more insight into the company's priorities, but also their challenges and future direction, which is really important. It's also helpful to look at the industry as a whole. So what are their competitors doing? So you can position your value in relation to what's going on in the broad context. So preparation is really, really important and it helps us to feel more confident. The other part is to prepare for those questions that we find difficult, not so that they're rehearsed, so they become familiar. Often when it comes to preparing for interviews and thinking about questions, sometimes we might not want to go through the difficult questions that we find tricky, but actually that can really help. We want to be framing our preparation for those questions in terms of what is the impact that I can make? What actions have I taken to drive that impact? And how can I be remembered for the result of my actions? So I have a really simple method that I use with all of my clients in their CVs and also in interview preparation. When we ask questions, what works really effectively is if we tell a story. And the best way to tell a story is by using a simple method called CAR. It's a great way to structure your answers. There's a clear beginning, there's a clear middle, and there's a clear end. C of CAR stands for challenge. So what was the business challenge? What were you there to do? This is going to set the scene. This is going to tell the interviewers the information that we're not going to assume that they already know. So C is for the challenge. A is for action. So what action did you take to help address that business challenge? And then R is for result. What was the outcome of the action you took to address that business challenge? Now, ideally, that R is the result is going to be something measurable. So it could be money saved, it could be time saved, number of people impacted, number of regions, for example. But what that's going to do is it's going to tell a story. Now, it's short, it's punchy, and it's easy to remember. Lots of people use the STAR method, but I think it's really long-winded. So CAR is very simple. Challenge, action, result. Remember, by the time that you get to interview stage, the organization and the interviewers already believe that you can do the job. And now it's about who's going to be the right fit. So everyone in the interview process will have a similar skill set, but what's going to set you apart is how you do what you do. And that's why telling your story in this format can be really, really effective. When you're thinking about the action that you took, it's not just what you did, but how you did it. For example, did you bring people together that were resistant to change? Did you keep things moving under pressure? Those small little details are going to tell the interviewer what you've done, but also how you've done it. Because everyone in that process will have a similar skill set. But how you do what you do and what makes you unique, that's going to set you apart. The how is really, really critical when you're interviewing, you're telling people the story. I'll give you an example. I was working with a client, she's a graphic designer, preparing for her final stage of interview. As part of that preparation, we did some interview practice and I asked her the question, tell me about a time when a project didn't go so well. And initially Sam said, well, I had to help a client redesign their website. We had lots of stakeholders involved and so it made it tricky, but we got there share in the end. There's nothing wrong with that answer, fairly surface level. And what we want to do is we want to give the interviewers a little bit more. So what we did is we reframed it using the CAR method. The client needed a full website redesign. There were competing priorities from multiple stakeholders, and they were on a really tight deadline. Now, the actions that she took from the discussion that we had was she set up regular check-in meetings. She created a feedback document with the heads of marketing, the heads of sales, and that meant that she could spot conflicting priorities early on and therefore address the challenges quickly rather than waiting to the end. And that meant the website launched on time. Through talking to her, she told me that the traffic increased by 25% in the first month, which is a pretty good result. What we did is we took her original answer, which was, I helped redesign the client's website and I worked with the team to get it done, but there were competing priorities and it's tricky, and we upgraded it using the CAR method. And then the way that she shared her answer was as follows. The client needed a full website redesign with competing priorities from multiple stakeholders, including the head of marketing and the head of sales, all at a very tight deadline. So I worked closely with the team to ensure that everyone was aligned, and I suggested using a feedback document for the stakeholders that allowed me to highlight any conflict. I could address them early on. What resulted was that we were able to launch the website on time and the traffic increased by 25% in the first month. Option A versus option B. I hope you will agree that option B, it showed her impact and it showed how she did it. We were giving the same answer, but with a lot more detail. It was high impact. And what that means is it's going to be memorable from the interviewers. They're going to remember that. I'd like to offer you an optional reflective exercise outside of this session. I want you to think about your top 5 achievements. So when you go to an interview, what are the stories that you roll out? And I want you to apply the CAR method to each of those, telling a story with the context, the action, and the result, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I want you to practice them. I don't want it to be rehearsed because we know that doesn't work so well. But what you could do is have a couple of bullet points for each of those elements and then get into the habit of telling stories this way and see if it makes a difference to how you feel about telling your stories and sharing your impact. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the nerves. You know, I had a show of hands. We all get nervous interviewing or public speaking, whatever it may be. And I do want to share that I've worked with some really senior people and the nerves don't go away. It doesn't matter if you're more senior, maybe they get more practice, but the nerves are very much still there. And I want to share that it's a deeply human experience to get nervous around this. There's a reason behind it. And I want to share this with being watched. It triggers a primal response in us. In prehistoric times, being the center of attention could mean danger. What that means is that being watched feel like you're being threatened. So brains, when we have that attention, default to that flight or fight response. It's not just in your head. It's actually, we're wired biologically to feel this way. And that's why even seasoned professionals can feel jittery. But the good news is we can change the narrative and we can switch it up a little bit. One of the ways to do that is to go from thinking, I'm really nervous, I feel really uncomfortable, to actually, I'm feeling excited about this because I get to share my experience. I get to share my impact, why I'm going to be really useful and make an impact in this role. By saying that, you know, we've all got this internal dialogue, feel nervous, comfortable about this, but if we can switch that saying, I feel excited, it's going to change how we feel. I think it's really helpful to kind of have the context of why sometimes, you know, being in an interview can feel unnerving. We've got a biological response to that. There's a couple of other things that can be really useful. You've done your preparation, which absolutely that's the foundation to it, but it's also about preparing in the moment. Prior to the interview starting, it's really useful. Maybe your heart's racing, maybe you're feeling a little bit jittery, to really focus on the breath. This is a technique that I've taken from my yoga practice and it's really calming. It's called box breathing. So essentially the purpose of it is to calm your nerves, lower your heart rate. And so when you start the interview, you'll start it in a way where you're feeling calm and composed. And how you start the interview has such an impact on how you go on, because if you struggle in those first couple of moments, it can kind of trip the rest of the interview. So starting strong is really, really important. The box breathing, and it's drawing a box at the same time. You inhale for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and you hold for a count of 4. And then you repeat drawing the box using that count of 4. And that's really going to calm you. A couple of other extra tips are, when you're asked a tricky question, what the default is that people will tend to spit something out. They're under pressure. I really encourage you to take a moment to give yourself the time that you need to think about the answer. So one of the ways to do that is to say, that's a really good question. I'm just going to take a moment to reflect on that. I want to give you my best story, or I want to give you my best example. It allows you to create space and think for the right answer, not just give an answer for the sake of it. And then the other thing to add is that it's really important to remember that an interview it's not an interrogation. They're actually curious. They want to know you. They want to understand what you're about. So those are a couple of tips to help you think about why the nerves are there, but also how you can calm the nerve and how you can manage when you're asked a tricky question. So let's talk about the do's and don'ts of online interviews. So many people think that online interviews are less of an interview or people don't take them as seriously. I believe it's the opposite. You need to work harder for an online interview. It's very different. You don't have the initial chit chat about the office or the weather when you first meet in person. So reading those social cues is even harder. It's really important to think about how you prep for it. You know, check the text working, dress for the role you want, not the role you've got. Make sure you've got a tidy face face, etc. But actually, body language is really, really important when you're meeting online. So it really helps to lean forward. That can show that you're interested rather than leaning back, casual. Also, maintaining an open posture is really useful. So rather than arms folded, hunched over, having an open posture is helpful. The palm of our hands, from a behavioral perspective, when people can see the palms of your hands, it's a non-threatening sign. So I'm not suggesting that you do this, but when you use hand gestures, people can see that you're not threatening. And then another thing is about using the camera. So it's very easy to be diverted. Try and focus on the camera. You don't need to stare at it. You can look away, but be really mindful that it's there. I've got one client and she has a little post-it note which says smile next to her camera. So she really, she smiles. We forget to do it. We take it really seriously. It's important that people get to see a little bit of your personality. Essentially, you're the product and they're buying you. Just like your CV, your personality should really shine through in an interview. The other thing that's really important online is to think about your vocal rhythm. So the pace at which you speak out, the pausing, the emphasizing the words, a little bit theatrical. Now, you don't want to dial it up too much that it feels uncomfortable. I would encourage you to dial it up a couple of notches than an in-person interview so people can really feel connected to you. And then the most important is present. Really focusing on the people in front of you, trying not to be distracted, giving yourself time beforehand to really come to the space. People can feel connected that way, making a lasting impression. There are two key elements to this. It's all about the questions that you ask and it's all about the closing. One of the biggest missed opportunities when it comes to interviewing is simply the questions that you've prepared for them. The interviewers will ask you, what questions have you got for us? Now, if you can find the answer on the internet, please do not ask it. Please do not ask it. Avoid it. You can find it out. It doesn't show you've done your homework. It doesn't show you've done your research. You can be really strategic about the questions asked. It can demonstrate the fact that you're interested in the role. I think it can demonstrate the fact that you are really keen. Really see this as something that's key to your success. With that in mind, I'm going to ask the group, does anybody want to share a couple of questions that they usually ask at the end of interviews?
I actually have not a question, but a comment, and I would really like to see what you think about that. So you spoke about an example that is quite good, right? Like you put hard there and you came with for the challenge and you even had a good ending for it, right? Like you really actually turned that situation around. Sometimes that is not what happens. So is there a way to use CAR for those times too? I feel that many times we have to reframe the things that also went wrong.
Things go wrong, projects don't go right, things are over budget or out of, creep out of scope or not on time. And I think it's about sharing the learning from that as well. So the result could, in this case, could be the reflection. What is the reflection? What is the learning? What's the takeaway? And that way you're demonstrating that, you've learned something new in the experience. And I think that's what people want to see in an interview. It's not about being perfect. It's not about not having any weaknesses. In fact, they want to know. They want to know you as a whole person. And I think it's really great to have good level of self-awareness. Where is there room for improvement? Where are the opportunities to grow? So that's what I would say. You can turn that art into reflection.
Like I said, what you shared about impact, this meeting truly resonated with me. I feel that many of us tend to forget this during our presentations, as we often give more weight to our fears and worries about whether we will be chosen or not, or what will happen if it doesn't work. Everything you said about impact, challenge, and the bigger picture is absolutely true, and I completely agree with you. Matt asked what a typical day in the role would look like.
Yes, that's a great question. What I would say about that is usually what they do in an interview is sometimes they start by telling you a little bit about the role. So I would say if they've given you that snippet, and this question maybe isn't so relevant, but I would hope that they kind of, from the initial start of the interview, they give you that. But if they don't, I think, yeah, absolutely, that's a great question to ask.
Is there anything that they should be thinking on? If that is something, for example, you are searching for the job and the examinator asks them how they normally work. Is there any tip there? Because would they think that the way they worked before should be good fit for what the new role would be?
Yeah, I think so there's a couple of questions that I think are really useful for finding that out. So I think it's useful to ask the interviewers, what brought you to this organization or to this role? Because that tells you why they were interested and it gives you a little bit of insight about the culture. But I also like to pair that with a question on what's kept you here, because you kind of get two layers. So you understand why people have been drawn to this, what they enjoy, which tells you about the culture. But what's kept you here tells you a little bit about why people are staying, why people are sticking around. And I think that's really, really important too. The other one that I really like, so typically a lot of people will say, oh, can you tell me about career progression? Now, of course, that's a great question, but I think we can level it a little bit. So I think it's quite nice to ask a little bit about, I'd really love to hear a little bit more about career progression. Can you tell me about, can you share an example of someone in the team that's recently been promoted? So what that does is it shares a little bit about how people get promoted, what it looks like. You get a sense of it. Whereas, can you tell me a little bit about career progression? It's very broad because this is a two-way process, remember, and it's really easy to forget this. As the candidate, you think, oh my gosh, I just want to get the job, and they get to choose. But actually, it's not the case. You get to choose. And I think it's so important that you ask the questions that you need to find out to make sure that it's a right fit for you. You demonstrate that you've done your homework and you're thinking about being in the role and you're thinking about the future of the organization. Can you share a little bit about the roadmap of the organization, where it's going, where you think the biggest challenges are? It's nice to be able to preface this with, I saw in your annual report that the strategy relates to this. Can you tell me a little bit more? So you're demonstrating you've done your homework, you're thinking about the future. So the questions at the end are really, really important. I think that people miss them, but I think that the quality of the questions can really demonstrate how you see yourself being in the role. And the other thing, the final thing, is the ending. So how you start and how you finish are so important, just as much as the middle. So when I run mock interviews, it's really common when we practice the end for people to say, thank you very much for your time. It was great to meet you. Now, that's nice, but I think it can be so much better. So you've got to remember, the closing, it is your last chance to leave an impression. So think of it as your final story. And so how I usually coach people is by, first of all, thanking each interviewer by name. Let's make it personal. And then highlighting something from the conversation that you are genuinely interested in and that you think you can make an impact on. So, for example, thank you so much for your time, Sarah and James. It was great to meet you today. I really just enjoyed our discussion about X and Y. I think in my experience, specifically related to A and B, I'd be a really valuable member of the team, and I think I fit in really well. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'd love to continue the conversation. That is the last thing that they are going to remember, and they are going to know: A, you've got relevant experience; B, you feel like you're a good fit in the team; C, you're enthusiastic; D, you want to go to next step. So I think people often think, oh, I've got to play a game. Maybe I don't want to be too keen. But I actually think if you're genuinely excited about the role and they've said something you're like, actually, yeah, I can really make an impact, then tell them. Because if you don't tell them, they won't know. And if they don't know, they're going to make a decision based on missed information. So again, it's really about, making your impact and being memorable. So going out strong is really, really important. I think there's a great opportunity to really leave that lasting impression.
There are so many questions now in the chat. Nika said, I also wanted to share something from my own interview experience. Very often I like to ask deeper and more meaningful questions to the HR representative. However, I have noticed that in many cases, they are mainly focused on recruitment and staffing rather than UX UI itself. Because of that, they often aren't able to provide answers to the important questions I ask. Maybe he's asking about the job itself or things that are really about the doing. What would you do in that situation?
I guess it depends on the number of processes in the interview, or the number of stages rather. So if you're at a screening stage, maybe you're not going to be speaking to your potential new manager. And so someone in HR, talent acquisition, they're not going to have the depth of experience or knowledge in the role as the hiring manager. So I think it's really important to tailor your questions according to the subject matter expert. Those questions, I would really leave them to the line manager. At some stage, you would be speaking to them.
Nirmal said about the last questions he would ask. So let's say it's good or bad. What's your favorite thing about working here? And the last question I have to remember to ask, what would be the next steps?
It's great to ask that first question. I think it gives insight into the culture. What I like to do is pair it with second part, which is what kept you here, because it's going to give you that extra level of information. And absolutely, the next steps is important. But I actually think, and I advise my clients, as part of the process, is at the beginning of the interview process to ask, what is the process? How many stages are there? What are the types of interviews? Will I be doing any exercises? Will I be doing any psychometric testing? You have every right to understand the full scope of the process and the timelines. And I actually think you should have that information at the very beginning. So I think try and get that early on. So I always encourage people when they submit their application to make a phone call. I know it's not always easy to get people on the phone these days, but it's really important to find out a little bit more about the role. Why was the role vacant? When are they looking to fill it? What are the stages? Can you tell me who I'm going to be meeting? So you begin to get a picture of that information, and you can use that for your application, and you can use it for your cover letter. And then it can be more personalized.
Christina now added a bunch here. Let's go 9 questions. What does onboard process look like for new design employees?
I guess my challenge to you with this is, and I know a lot of companies really struggle with strong onboarding processes. Even if the onboarding process wasn't, super sharp, would you take the job? In most cases, people would say yes. So in that case, I think because you only have the opportunity to ask maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 questions at a push, I'd probably leave that one because I think you've got some even better questions here.
What are the team's biggest UX challenge right now?
I would hope that they maybe started with that, they shared that. If they haven't shared that information, then absolutely it's worth asking that question. You're going to get insight into whether there are any conflicts or whether there are any challenges with different team members.
What are the most challenging part of leading the design team on a new SaaS project? What does your project process generally look like?
Again, I would hope a lot of the information from these questions comes at the very beginning, because usually what people do is they talk a little bit about the role of the team and the project at the beginning, kind of help you settle into the interview. So if they haven't done, definitely ask these questions.
Do you see your company going from remote to in person anytime in the future?
I think this is important for you to know, but often they won't necessarily have sight of that. So they're probably going to give you maybe quite a vague answer. So again, if you've only got a couple of questions, is this the best one to ask? Maybe I think there are others here that are really useful.
Where do you see the company growing in the next 1 to 5 years?
If it's not on their company page or in their strategy, then absolutely ask the question. But again, for me, this would be a question of, have you done your homework? Because ideally you would already know the answer there.
Do you have any doubts or concerns regarding my fit to this position? I love this one. I think it's really great to ask that.
It's a super question. It's an opportunity for you to, if they do have any doubts or concerns, for you to give them confidence in whatever they have those doubts or concerns about.
How does a company want to hire a UX designer? And how do you see the design team growing in the future?
Ideally, they've given you the information about why they're hiring for the role. And how do you see the design team growing in the future? That's a super question, because you get to understand the direction the team is traveling.
Yeah, I love the questions. And you mentioned something very interesting. When you think about your fit, or when you think about the concerns of the company or how it will be structured in the future, really leave those out when they won't really impact if you choose to work there or not. You are also there to choose, because last week I had an event and someone was asking like, do I get this project? Do I do it myself? Do I hire someone? Do I delegate? And I spoke about that, but I forgot about the main choice here. That is, you may just don't get the project. You don't like it. You don't want to work with these people. You are there to interview them as much as they are there to interview you. So you have to see if you want to work with these people, if they are nice. I understand that sometimes we want to do ends meet and that's hard and so on, but you are also the one there to evaluate if this is a place where you want to spend 8 hours a day to speak with these people, to work with them. So if you like processes in the work and that is really important to you, ask about that, right? And if it's not, if it doesn't matter. So it's not really about making a question just to impress the interview. It's really about you also getting this information to be able to decide if that's the best or not.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that I can add to that, Carla, is our gut instinct, right? That feeling that we have in our core when you're in a process and you're meeting new people. And so often our rational mind will disregard that feeling, but we've all had it where we've ignored that gut feeling. Maybe we've worked on a project or we've taken a job, and soon enough you're like, I should have listened to that, my gut. I should have listened to that internal compass, that knowing. So if you have a feeling where you're like, something feels off or something doesn't feel right, my gut trying to tell me something, spend a little time just being curious. Like, what is it? Like, without any judgment, without any pressure. It might not change your decision, but at least you've explored it. Because from the work that I do, I haven't had a person say to me yet in all of the years that I've been supporting people with their careers that I trust my gut and it was wrong. It's just never happened, right? I'd love to be proven wrong. So I think if you have that feeling like this project doesn't feel right, or, it just something's not sitting, just get curious about it. Maybe you ask yourself some open questions. What is that about? Because it's very, very telling. And the opportunity cost of choosing the wrong job or working on the wrong project, it doesn't just impact us, 9 to 5. It impacts our sleep, our energy, how we feel, how we show up for our friends and family. It's huge. So, we spend more time at work than anywhere else. So we've got to do what we love. So it is a two-way process. And if it doesn't feel right, I challenge you to be curious about that at the very least.
Yeah, I love that. So Constanza says, how do you measure success in this role during the first 6 months? I also love that. Never thought of it. This is a great question, isn't it?
I know of graduates in the market who, before their first round interview, are submitting a 30, 60, 90-day plan. They are saying to the organization, this is, if I'm successful, this is what I'm going to do in the first 30, 60, 90 days. And they're submitting a document before their interview. Because obviously the graduate market is really tough at the moment. They need to, make an impact. The interviewer might think, well, hold on a minute. If you've done your research and you know the job and you've got the experience, you should be telling us what you would do in those first 30, 60, 90 days. So I think we've just got to be a little bit careful with that question, because I think the market shifted and people, I know the graduates are really, they're imagining themselves being in the role and then, sharing a document to say, hey, if you pick me, this is what I would cover before they even interview. So I think I would be a little bit cautious with that question.
I have been asked to do that for marketing positions and project management positions, but never for design positions, because if you have no idea in what you are working on, you barely have a way to know what is being measured. So it is so many troubles, so many different projects. So I would still feel that it doesn't really apply to design in the case of the plan. If they ask that beforehand, yes, of course, because then you know. But if not, I would definitely go for a question like that. Nirmal said, another question I have asked is, what did you like about my CV or experience?
This is a great great question. And this gives you insight as to maybe what your edge over the others as well. So I think that can be a really useful question. But I think it's, you probably have 3-4 questions. So it's good to have a question bank. And if you're going through multiple stages, you don't need to ask the same questions each time. So collectively you might get 8-10 questions. So that's a great one to have in your question bank as well.
Amazing. And then Christina says thank you, and she adds, there are also some jobs that have 3, 6, 9 days expectations in the job description direct. And yes, if they ask there in the job description and you make this question, you might, did you read the description of the job or not, right? That would be awful.
This is where the phone call before you're replying is really, really valuable. So if you think about it, a job description is maybe something that the organization's had on record for a long time. Has it been updated recently? Things change. And the job description, it gives you an essence of the job, but it doesn't really give you what you need. And I think that's why it's so important to try and get in touch with the hiring manager or the recruiter and understand a little bit more about the role. And that way you can tailor the application, you can tailor your CV. And so many people don't bother, and it's a missed opportunity. I think it can really set you apart for everyone else that's competing, because you can use that to your advantage because you found out a little bit more about the role. Because a job description, I see it as almost like a wish list. Like the organization, they want all of these things, and maybe they can't have them all, but what are the most important things? Now you would think that it's in order of priority, but maybe it's not. So it's really useful to pick up the phone and have a conversation. And I know it's hard to get people on the phone and find numbers, but I think it's worth making the effort to do that, because it's better to do a handful of high quality applications than lots and lots of kind of average substandard applications. And we know as a result of AI that the number of applications per job has absolutely skyrocketed, but the quality is questionable. Maybe everybody sounds the same because they're all using the same AI to generate the answers. So this is where being authentic and knowing your impact is so, so important.
Christina asks, are career fairs helpful?
Fairs are helpful, but I think what's even more helpful is networking. And I could spend a whole hour talking about how to leverage your network. And lots of people think, it's about me begging for a job. It's not. It's about changing the mindset. Lots of organizations offer a referral fee. In fact, in Australia, I know of a situation where someone has received $10,000 for referring someone that joined the organization and stayed for a year. $10,000. And it happens in the UK. It happens in every country, because finding good talent is difficult. And one of the easiest ways to get an interview is have your name referred to the hiring manager or the recruiter from someone inside the company. So I would say learning how to leverage your network in a way that doesn't give you the ick, in a way that feels really natural to you, is by far the most valuable thing that you can do in your job search.
Come to more events like this. Network. Come on, guys. Let's put there the LinkedIn on the chat for everyone to connect with each other. On the UX/UI Hub, you have a place where you can add there, I am on to network. I am available to network, and then your profile appears with your LinkedIn link too, and people can connect with you. Those connections may sound like, Carla, but a bunch of designers are connecting with me. But you know where designers work? For companies that hire designers. And sometimes these teams grow. And it's really good to have other designers on your side too, and know how they do their job, learn about what they are doing, even getting tips from them, right? You have a little, do you have a 15-minute time to chat with me and show me the last project you have been working on, if this is not an NDA or something like that? That's a really great way to learn more about the company itself, learn about this one person, know how they do their work, and even maybe if you know something else that could help them, tell them about it, or learn from them what they are teaching you. So networking is essential for everything in life right now.
It is. And to add to that, Carla, I think there's a part of networking that people often forget, but I think it's really important, which is about paying it forward. So people tend to network when they need something, and that's why it feels icky. I think the way that I advise my clients is have an always on networking approach, especially when you're in paid work. So how can you pay it forward? How can you connect someone? How can you make a referral? What can you do to support other people? Because you never know when you're going to be in a time of need, and sometimes it catches us off guard. I mean, there's so many redundancies at the moment, and so having that always on networking mentality, always wanting to pay it forward, and it will come back to you.
Totally agree. I think that's a must. Nimal say, I am finding a common feedback is that I have learned tools. I am too experienced rather than someone that has transitioned in from a different industry.
This is where there's an opportunity in the cover letter and it depends how bold you want to be, how courageous, how much constructive tension you want to create. But if you think that that's going to be a common problem, then I think telling your story about why this company, why this role, why having that experience is going to be an advantage, and also why you're not going to be a flight risk, because often when people think that someone's too experienced, they think they're not going to be challenged in the role, or they're not going to stay in the role for long enough. So the cover letter is an opportunity to tell your story. Now, most people don't submit cover letters. I think cover letters are, again, another missed opportunity. I think that a cover letter is an opportunity to go into much more detail, your CV, kind of difficult in a CV. So I would use your cover letter to really tell the story of why you, and give them the assurance that your experience isn't an issue. It's actually a competitive advantage. So that's how I would tackle that.
I love that. And I learned about cover letters here in Switzerland. In Brazil, they don't exist, but I do agree with Kooks, like really prepare yours tailored to that job description, to what you are going to do there, to what you are going to pack, why that role is important to you, how you feel about the company. Don't forget to add that. And not be robotic. Don't be robotic. Don't be ChatGPT and even copy this was made with ChatGPT. Please take care. Like it is right to use AI to fix things you have written and see if everything is checked. Things like spelling, if there is something that's confused, do that, but be aware of what is sent. Don't just copy and paste and send. Never do that. It was so amazing to get all these questions here, to think about the interview process. It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really insightful. And thank you everyone for joining us and stay until the end too. That's it for today. We are going to meet next week again at the same time. And so see you around. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet everyone.